So I'm going to start with this poster. During this next video, you're going to see quite a lot of these posters. I'll come back to why I'm using so many of these a little bit later on, but they are important, so pay close attention to them. What we're going to look at now is government control. During periods of war, especially in a war like this one where the British public are being so heavily impacted upon by the fighting, and when there's so many people involved in the fighting, the government has to start taking control in a lot of different ways in order to mobilise the entire country to be victorious. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is the new ministries that were introduced by the British government, home defence, rationing, and finally, and most importantly, the Ministry of Information. So first of all, new ministries. This poster, as you can see behind me, is all to do with railways. It says at the bottom of it, all clear for the guns on British railways. This poster is implemented or set up by something called the Ministry of Transport, where they are essentially trying to tell people that the war comes first. So if your journey is not essential, then you shouldn't make that journey. You should allow people who are involved in the fighting or who are involved in the military efforts to use the trains instead. Other ministries, the Ministry of Supply. So the Ministry of Supply is essentially a government organisation which are in charge of the supply of various raw materials like coal, iron, steel, etc. The Ministry of Food is responsible for the distribution of food, which we'll come to later when we start looking at rationing. The Railway Executive Committee, which is what I've just mentioned to you, who released this poster here. The Ministry of Labour, who are in charge of distributing the labour that is necessary, the workforce that is necessary to complete all the various different jobs that are required to be done during wartime. And finally, and like I said, most importantly, the Ministry of Information. Secondly, home defence. Home defence was another way in which the British government maintained their control over the people of Britain during World War II. The first, as we've mentioned in a previous video, is evacuation. Vulnerable people were evacuated out of cities and into the countryside to take them away from danger and to reduce panic. Secondly, there were air raid precautions put up, air raid wardens, air raid shelters, air raid protocol that was put up in the event of Britain being attacked by the Germans, as indeed they were during the Blitz. So here's an example of one such poster. It tells you to be cool, don't scream, prevent disorder, obey all instructions. Essentially, do what you're told and we will come out of this better than we would do if you don't. Air raid wardens as well, a very important part of this maintaining order in the face of German attacks. The Home Guard, so the most men between the ages of 18 and 40 would have been conscripted and they would have been sent off to various different parts of the world to fight. At home, therefore, there would have been very few soldiers, so men between the ages of 41 and 55 would have been called up to join what's called the Home Guard. Anyone that's seen an old sitcom called Dad's Army will know what this is all about, but essentially it's a bunch of old guys who are, and very young people as well, who are trained to defend Britain in the event that we were invaded. And finally there's the blackout. So during the Blitz, there was an attempt made to make sure that all lights that existed in a city, even down to something like lighting a cigarette, was not done once the sun had gone down, because that light can be seen from a long way up, and any Germans who are flying overhead would therefore know that there are population centres down below them and might target their bombs on them. And many posters like this one here would have been put up all around British cities to encourage people to remember that fact. Next up, rationing. So again, these posters are appearing all the time and they're encouraging people to do certain things. And in this case, it's rationing. This isn't encouraging people to ration, it's actually encouraging people to start growing their own food. Because during the war, food was very scarce. 70% of British food is actually imported. German attacks, as mentioned in a previous video, forced rationing because many boats were sunk, and that meant that less food was getting to British shores, and therefore Britain had to introduce rationing. So that means that basic foodstuffs are assigned a series of points. Various different foodstuffs will have different numbers of points based upon how expensive they are, how plentiful they are, and so on. Each person is allocated coupons worth points, And every time you go to the shop, you buy your goods, and whatever it is that you're buying needs to be in exchange for these coupons. You can't have more than the coupons dictate, essentially, and every purchase is recorded by shopkeepers. People, as I've already mentioned in that poster, are encouraged to grow their own food to supplement the things that they're buying. And in this climate, the black market flourished, which meant that illegally, of course, many people were buying and selling things that were otherwise rationed. So finally, I come to the most important part of this video, which is the Ministry of Information. You might well recognise some of these images. The one behind me, I'm going to try and move out of the way. Keep calm and carry on. It's the sort of thing you see on a t-shirt sold down in Camden Market. You probably don't even go to Camden Market, but there we go. Your courage, your cheerfulness, your resolution will bring us victory. All of these things are posters that were produced by the Ministry of Information. Another one that you might recognise, or another phrase you might recognise, keep mum, she's not so dumb, or careless talk costs lives. These are the kinds of posters that would have been put up around Britain. Why? Well, these would have been presented by something called the Ministry of Information, and the Ministry of Information had two distinct purposes. The first is for propaganda, so they would put up posters, they would give out leaflets, which are essentially designed to guide the population's thoughts and their activities. It's designed to boost morale, it's designed to tell people what it is that they should do in order to better help the British war effort. And there's also films which are highly censored or highly influenced by the Ministry of Information. Things like Henry V, which was a Laurence Olivier film, which is designed to boost confidence. I'm not going to start regaling you with what happens in Henry V. If you want to know, go find the video. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube, in fact. And most importantly, the Ministry of Information was responsible for censorship. So essentially what they do is they prevent information transfer between whichever party or between parties that will either lower morale or encourage the enemy or help the enemy. So newspapers, magazines, even private letters were victims of censorship, and there were large offices that employed hundreds and hundreds of censors who would literally read every private letter sent. They would look at all magazines, they would look at all newspapers, and if something was written that wasn't allowed to be written, it would simply be taken out.